Hi, and welcome to the Scenic Route podcast. This is the show for building a successful and sustainable business on your terms. My name is Jen, and I'm a rebranding sociologist with a soft spot for rhubarb pie. Each week, I'll strive to expand your branding, business expertise, and mindset capacity. I'm so excited you're here, and now let's get into today's episode.
Linda Katz is a wild feminine life coach and queer movement teacher who has been on a quest for the last decade to reclaim her wild. She spent 5 years on her heroine's journey, escaping all the external cages she thought were keeping her constrained, including her corporate job. But after changing nearly everything in her life and realizing that she still didn't feel the wildness she most longed for, she set out on a heroine's descent to dismantle the cage that existed within. Linda, thank you so much for joining me on the Scenic Route podcast today. How are you?
I'm doing really well. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited for this conversation.
Yeah, me too. Like, I don't know, I'm always kind of like hopeful that people get as much joy out of listening to the episodes as I have talking to people, because this is like it's just so cool. Like, I'm meeting all these amazing people, and like I hope anyone else except my mom is as excited as I am. No, but like, give us all an idea of who you are. Like, walk us briefly through your story, like how you started, how you got where you are today. Like, what were like the pivotal moments in your story, the big crossroads?
Yeah. So that's a great intro question. I feel like for me, this journey that I'm on started about a decade ago. And it started with this moment where I realized that I was not living the life that I wanted to live. It was, one of those moments where you open your eyes and you see, you're like, I made the choices to get to where I am today. And yet somehow they don't feel like they belong to me.
Oh,
Like, my life doesn't feel like it belongs to me. It doesn't necessarily bring me joy. And that was that initial kind of moment of awakening, or one of them, right? Of just,
it's a harsh one though. Like,
yes, because then you start, that's like all of the questions, and that's the unraveling that comes after that. And so from that moment, for the next, which was in 2010, for the next 5 years, I spent escaping all of what I thought at the time were like the external cages in my life that were keeping me from feeling this kind of wild authenticity that I was looking for.
Can you give us an example, like what kind of cages you left at the time?
Oh yeah. So it's, a relationship, a long-term relationship ended. Shortly thereafter, I met my husband. I went to health coaching school, and shortly thereafter was like, I'm done with corporate. I'm going to be a health coach full time. A leap in the net will appear. My husband and I moved from Los Angeles to Austin, Texas.
Yeah.
Total overhaul.
Wow.
And so at the end of that 5 years, my entire life looked different. Where I worked, where I lived, who I was with, I didn't really know very many people in Austin, so I had new friends, I picked up new hobbies. And so you can imagine the sheer disappointment and frustration when I still didn't feel the way that I wanted to feel.
Oh, that must have been a hard one.
Yes, because that's, I've changed everything. I've done all the things. I've changed all the big things in my external life.
Right? Like,
yes. That's what I thought. Turns out that wasn't the case, because I did all the external work, which required some inner work, right?
But it does also take courage to leave a long-term relationship, right? Like, it's not just, okay, whatever, fuck this shit, I'm done, right? Like,
yes. So there was that courage, but what I didn't realize was that I took myself with me wherever I went.
How did that make you feel?
There was a cage that existed in me that I brought wherever I was going to go. And that cage is what I now call the good girl and the Tyrant King. There were these energies within me that were, the people pleasing, that I was really good at being a bit of a chameleon. I didn't, I wasn't conscious of it at the time, but I could just slightly change who I was.
Between good girl and Tyrant King, depending on the situation, or like,
and between everything, I could kind of sense what people liked. And so I would just bring forth those facets of me.
You would enhance those qualities that you would assume people would like most.
Exactly. And in that process, I lost what was actually me. Like who was I underneath? And like, who am I underneath all of that? And so that was really when I started what I call the heroine's journey, which was that inner journey of clearing out all that crap to try to find, like, what is me? What is mine? What have I kind of buried of myself along the way? Because oftentimes, like we bury the facets that we think are not going to be liked, or the emotions that we think.
Yeah. Or where we feel like we will be shamed for.
Yes.
Like we don't want to feel shame. So I don't know, everything remotely like, oh no, that could be embarrassing, or it could be shame for this, or like, we're like, just like sweeping under the carpet. Yeah.
Exactly. Yep. We just push that down. And I think that creates something that is untenable.
Yeah.
And so that was really the journey that I went on from like 2015 to like 2020-ish, I would say, like that next 5 years.
Yeah.
And in that process, that started to shift my work, because I realized as I started to do that journey and work with my own coach, and I became really fascinated and enamored with this dynamic of masculine and feminine energy as it shows up within each individual. And I realized at that point that I was like, I don't want to do health coaching. Like, I'm really bored talking to people about food. I was like, I don't want to talk about this. I'm like, it was, and nobody wanted to talk to me about food either. They wanted to talk to me about, their relationships. And that was the parts of their lives that I was way more interested in. I wasn't interested if they were eating kale. I was like, eat kale if that floats your boat.
Yeah. If not, then fine. Find something else. Yeah.
And so I was, working on my own business from 2014 for 5 years. And it was just, at that point, for much of it, I was still kind of entrenched in this kind of Tyrant King, good girl energy. And the Tyrant King is like that energy that is really, it's kind of like the patriarchal masculine is a way to think of it. It's pushing, it's really dictated by what I should be doing.
Yeah. And by output, I suppose.
Yes. Productivity, 100%. It's that like productivity at all costs.
Yeah.
And so even though I had left my corporate job, I still brought that same energy to my coaching business.
Yeah.
And combined with the good girl. So there was the pushing of the Tyrant King, the good girl who was like, I don't want to be seen right now. I'm afraid to be seen as I am.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to kind of water down my message.
Yeah. So they're both kind of like canceling each other out because
And so, so it was really slow going. And it was like, I basically got to a point that I was like, I don't know if I can continue to grow my business in this way.
Okay.
Where it's that space of, and the Tyrant King is also, we live in a world we need money. And so it was like, I need this business to make me money. And so it came with this urgency wrapped around in it as well.
Which robs it of any like fun and play and ease, right? Like it's just, I get it.
Yeah. Yes. And so in 2019, I went back to working a corporate job and growing my business on the side. And I took probably all of 2020 off from doing any kind of client facing new client stuff. I really just took that year. I worked with a marketing mentor, Tad Hargrave of Marketing for Hippies, and like basically just great name. I know.
Love it.
Basically took that year to develop like, what is it that I do? And to do all of that legwork that I never gave myself. One, I never gave myself permission because it felt like, it wasn't that income generating right away. And two, that was scary. I had no idea. I was too fresh in my business. I didn't know what I did. I didn't know who I worked with. I was still figuring it out.
Yeah.
And so this gave me like being able to have the corporate job and the corporate income gave me breathing room.
Yeah.
To be able to do that.
I think that's so important, right? Because there are two types of people, right? The one, both people have their back against the wall. And one kind of people, I like to call them the 10K, 10K people, they're like, ooh, this pressure is totally motivating me and I'm gonna go get the money so I can pay rent. That's cool. Love those people. They're not us.
Yeah.
And I bet anyone listening to CD Groot is not that person either. We're like, nah, I either go back into my shell or I dive into my submarine or like, I don't know, whatever, but no. Yeah. Or I get in my rebel brain mode and be like, nope. So releasing that pressure by having a steady income in a job that's not overtly exhaustive gives you more space to breathe. I think that's such a powerful decision, right? Like, I mean, like we're real people, right? Like we're not having the trust funds or like the rich spouses. Like, so this is actually what we do while we're building our business. Like, I mean, I remember, I don't know, it was 2018 or so. I was in a similar position. I was like, if I could find something for a couple of months, that is like a no-brainer job, right? Like you leave, you clock out, you leave, you're not thinking about it.
Yeah.
I don't know. It would just ease up things of like, I have to get a client. And I did the Christmas, like the pre-Christmas run at Lush, like Lush Beauty Cosmetics, stuff like that. And it was actually kind of great. Like I was on the shop floor, I did sales, I talked to people, it was great fun. Like, and at the end of the day, I went home, like I still had like energy to do like work on my business. I got the paycheck. I was like, fine, I don't have any other pressure. But I feel there's so much shame around that. Like as if you haven't got your shit together if you're doing that. And it's just bullshit. Like you actually have very much your shit together if you're doing that.
Yes, it's this, and it's that kind of pervasive all or nothing.
Yes,
I
black
think
and white
exists in our culture, right?
That.
Yes, you're either over here in corporate or you're an entrepreneur. And so, I think it really pushes. I know people who's pushed out of entrepreneurship that really feel a deep calling to the work that they're doing, but it's like a lot of times it takes time. It doesn't have to, if we're not going to be doing the pushy, urgent, if we're not, I'm not the 10K in 10 days person. And so if that's not your jam, it's allowing it space for it to be more organic, for the growth to be organic and to take time. And it's, when I first went back, there was definitely that shame, like 100%, because it was this sense of, oh no, I failed. Like I couldn't get it together. Like you said, I can't get my shit together.
How did you as a person, how did you deal with that?
It took, even that just took time to get to be able to reframe it, to see that it was, that I was actually doing this in support of my work, because my coaching work, teaching Koya, that's where my soul lights up. It's a calling. If it wasn't a calling, I would have put it down a long time ago, because it hasn't always been easy, right? It's like, but something keeps pulling me back into it. And so to see that it was that my having that job wasn't putting it aside. It was rather that it was allowing me to continue to do it in a way that I didn't have to burn myself out, that I could put the play and the creativity back in it, which I work with women and the wild soul, like that energy, like to be in that space with the urgent energy, like they just don't mix. It needs spaciousness.
Yeah. That's like, when you meet someone and you're like, I don't really know what, but something's off. Like something doesn't match up. Like we feel this, right? Or even with businesses or with their brands, like we sometimes can't really pinpoint what it is,
but we're like,
Mm-hmm.
something's not adding up for
Mm-hmm.
me. So I'm like, I'm gonna be cautious
Yes.
because something, yeah,
Yes. It's like the energy, and like, we live in animal bodies. So we pick up
yeah,
on energy. We pick up on that kind of instinctual level and
yeah,
that intuitive level. And like you said, we may not be able to identify it, but it's like there's some kind of disconnect between the energy
yeah.
that is happening and the words that are coming
Yeah,
out.
absolutely. And I mean, we all know this, or I don't know. I say now we all know this because I don't know. I'm a human design projector. I don't know if that means anything to you, but and then path. So whenever I'm in a room, it sometimes it's really hard. It feels really hard to me to distinguish between what am I feeling and what is kind of like the collective energy of the room,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, so sometimes you get in a room where you're like,
Mm-hmm.
ooh, everyone is like, or when you're at the airport and everyone is like crazy, you starting to become crazy, like all stressed too, right? Because it's just the collective energy of the place is like seeping
Yes.
into you. Although you were super calm just a minute ago, like so, like that
Yes.
energetic thing,
Yes.
it is happening, and it's so interesting
Yes.
to be like, hey, yeah, like have to be mindful of that, especially when you have a business that markets towards women who are sensitive of this, right? Like
Yes.
it's not gonna add up.
Yes.
Or even if you can convince those women, it probably would end up make you feel bad or something, like just something's not right. Like, what was I doing?
Right. Well, yeah. And I think it's so much of it is creating a soft and sacred place to
Yeah.
land. And it's like if I'm in this like kind of, activated in a negative way space, it's really hard for me to hold that space and
Mm.
that container for my client who might have all of these different feelings and emotions and
Yeah.
things happening. Like it's really important for me to be in the center of
Oh
myself
yes.
so that
Yeah.
I can hold that space
Yeah.
for them, which is, part of my
Yeah.
work that I offer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That reminds me of an interesting conversation I had with a women coach, and I was like, well, why now? Why me? Why now? And she was like, well,
Mm-hmm.
I want to take on more clients. Like I have like set this goal. I want to like increase like revenue streams. Like I want to have more clients. Like, okay, cool. And then we got talking, and it became pretty clear pretty fast that she currently does not have enough capacity to take on new clients, right? Like we always think
Mm-hmm.
of like, okay, more clients, but how many clients, if you're
Yeah.
truly being honest to yourself, like how many
Uh-huh.
different clients can you take on? Not in numbers, but in like energy, right? Like
Yes.
especially if, I don't
Yes.
know, if you're having clients who are dealing with a lot of hard shit, that
Mm-hmm.
weighs more than a bubbly
Mm-hmm.
client. Like, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
So you gotta also
Yes.
think of that, I think, and to kind of like keep that in balance for yourself as well. As you said, you gotta be in the right energy too.
Yes. And that more isn't always
Yeah.
better, right? That there has to be that space of checking in, like you said, checking in with
Mm.
ourselves and our own energetic capacity and our
Yeah.
bandwidth.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
yeah,
But
yeah,
like checking in is such a good starting point for like another conversation. Like, I mean, we all now like heard like to sit with our emotions and like to check in and to like allow emotions to surface, la la la, right? But like
yeah, yeah.
that's one side of the coin. And like I feel step 2 and 3 are where we kind of like jump ship. Like step 2, like
Mm,
really trusting whatever is coming up, and then step 3,
mm,
like acting on that. I feel that's where most of us
mm.
jump ship, right? Because then shit gets hard.
Yeah. Well, yeah, yeah. It's that, and I think with our emotions too, it's like we have to develop this relationship with them because we may not want to act on
Yeah.
all of them. Some of them we may want to, but we can have this capacity to develop a relationship with them, to reflect on them, to, um, all of those pieces. And with intuition, when there's something that is like, that piece of what is bubbling up, like, I want to do this, there's something that's really coming forth from that space, that I think is where it gets difficult to hear that voice clearly, because the voice of the good girl and the tyrant king will come in and usurp it, right? Or just smush it, because, if we're in the good girl energy, our wants and needs are usually very far from the surface of what we are aware of, right? We're aware of everyone else, and we're very aware of what we're supposed to be doing, of how we are the responsible one, which is not a bad thing, right? It's just that when it comes at the cost to ourselves, that's when it starts to get murky.
Or like, maybe I'm wondering, like, how much of the good girl has led to you back when you were 28 of like realizing, oh shit, this is not actually, I know it's my life, but it's not actually what I wanted. Right? Like, because we are all so deeply, like, people who grew up identifying as women, we've been all so conditioned of like almost taking care of others' needs before our own. So I'm just curious, how much good girl energy did you identify when you were 28 and were like, shit, what's going on?
I mean, I wouldn't have known it then. I just knew that I was like, this does not feel good, right? But looking back, I was like, yeah, that was what brought me to that point. Because when we are in that energy, we do what we're supposed to do. We look for external validation of what's expected of us. And we're often very good at meeting and exceeding other people's expectations of who we're supposed to be. And so we go along with that, and we don't realize that it's like we're not actually present in the decisions that we're making. And part of the thing too, I think, is that it allows us to retain a certain level of innocence, right? Of our perceived innocence, because we never feel like we have the choice. We're just doing what we have to do. And so to come in and start to look at, like, what is it, to listen for that voice of what is it that is calling to me? What do I want? To take responsibility for our own lives and to make decisions that can sometimes be very difficult, because we could disappoint people, right? Who want us to do something different.
I'm just thinking of, like, I'm still thinking of that, what you said, like, to preserve our innocence. And I'm kind of like wondering, it doesn't really stop there. I feel like, I mean, why do we want to preserve our innocence? I don't know. We always get a lot of these, like, innocence is such like pristine, highly valued word, like, right, like the innocent princess, like the innocent maiden that has to be rescued, like the innocent virgin, right? Like, and are we afraid of losing our innocence because we feel we become less attractive? I know, it's just where my head now went. Like, does it really stop with innocence? Or is it tied to something deeper? Because we fear we'll be less desirable.
And probably less worthy. Right? That's the word that comes up for me, is that, like, where do we locate our self-worth? And it's interesting that all of the archetypes that you mentioned, they were all more female identified archetypes.
Yes.
It's not like, oh, the innocent prince. Like, we never hear that, right? That's not
the virgin prince. What?
No, that's not what we hear. And so I think that it is this, it's our worth. It's how we gain approval in a patriarchal society, potentially. Right?
Yeah, right. Because innocence is not a value women value. Like, I don't know. I've never heard women voices talking of innocence. I'm like, wait, what? Is it a perfume? Like, it's a male lens value.
Yes. And it's something, it belongs to childhood, right? In some ways.
Absolutely. It does belong to childhood, but it's kind of like, as women, as we grow up, as our body changes, we're still stuck with that innocence thing. And it's just like, no, like, our bodies are gloriously messy. Like, if you've ever seen childbirth, like, it's a mess, right? Like, so, and gloriously so, right? But it's not innocent.
No.
That's probably the last word I would think of. If someone would
Yeah.
ask me to describe, like, I don't know, add women identifying characteristics,
Yeah.
stereotypical, whatever, I probably would name innocence at the last, like, I don't know, if it would
Yeah.
even come up.
Yes.
It's
Yes.
so interesting,
Yeah.
right? Like, but
Hmm.
it's a deeply philosophical question. Are we afraid of losing innocence because it means we're losing self-worth, or we're losing attractability, or like with attractability or desirability, are we also losing self-worth? Because if no one wants
Mm.
us, do we want ourselves?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. And, it really changes too the way that we see ourselves, right? Like when we
Mm,
start that maturation process to be able to decide for ourselves is, we have to claim our power, which means that in some ways we claim our power for creation and destruction. And when
mm,
we've been in that innocent phase, we identify a lot of times with all of the light. We identify with all of the good. We identify,
mm-hmm,
we want all
mm-hmm,
of that. And we don't want to acknowledge
mm-hmm,
that we have this full spectrum of power and to learn to trust ourselves with it, because that is
mm.
something that I think that women have not been taught in Western patriarchal culture.
Yeah, no, I agree. And mostly because our mothers haven't been taught. So they had no way of passing it on to us.
Yeah, and I think that our mothers, grandmothers, whatever it
Mm,
is, a lot of the times it's like, I think what has been passed down through a lot of feminine lineages was done so because it was to keep us safe,
mm.
right? That to stay small, to stay quiet, to stay
Yeah.
innocent.
But I mean, that keeps on repeating until today, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's still like the classic discourse that goes on if there's a sexual assault. Well, she wore a short skirt. Like, wait, what?
Yes.
Right? Like,
Yes.
so your mother probably told you to not dress a certain way because
Hmm.
I don't know, you might attract the wrong people. Instead of
Hmm.
like fathers teaching their sons, just don't fucking
Don't
assault
touch.
someone.
Yes. 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 And so there's another piece of innocence and safety, right?
Mm.
Like to stay innocent is also to stay safe in a certain way.
Oh, yeah. And then to what degree are you trading safety for liberty?
Hmm.
Ooh.
Mm.
Ooh, like I don't know. I feel
Some
like I need
deep
gin tonic. Like
questions.
we're getting or a red wine. Like we're ooh, this is like or like I don't know. I feel like I should have like a roaring fire right beside me and like a glass of red wine and be like, yeah, wait, let me have a sip. Let me think about this. Let me marinate this. this.
Yes, yeah, these are not small questions. These are not
Mm,
small questions. And
no,
I think that
no.
a friend of mine once shared something similar about dogs, of all things. But
Ooh. Mhm.
she said that, thousands of years ago, dogs traded, safety for freedom when they became domesticated by humans, right? They
Oh.
got the cushy life.
Yeah.
They got food, they got
Yeah, yeah.
shelter, but what did they lose? They lost the freedom to rove. They lost some of their ferocity. Their
Yeah.
natural instincts couldn't really be come out
Mm,
anymore.
yeah.
And I wonder how much the same is true for women.
Yeah, like for sure, especially when you look at how much hate gets thrown at women who speak up or just be audacious and just be
Mm-hmm.
like, we know what, this is me, fuck this shit. Like there gets so much hate thrown at these women.
Mm-hmm.
So I totally see, yeah, that there is an aspect of safety. And I mean, in our society, in our Western white society, maybe safety in a more broader sense. But if we
Mm-hmm.
look at what's going right now, what is happening in Iran with the burning of the
Mm.
headscarves, it's actually pretty much like safety as you as a physical human being. It's actually bloody
Mm-hmm.
fucking real.
Yes.
So
Yes.
yeah. And I mean you could make the
Yes.
choice to stay innocent, invisible, safe,
Mm-hmm.
or you could
Yeah.
choose to risk that and gain liberty.
Yeah. And it is a risk. And it's like, and that's the choice I think that every woman has to make for herself. Because like you said, that is a very real thing. Like it's not it's not, at least in some parts of the world, and sometimes here, in the West as well, it's a very real question of safety versus liberty.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, it's got to be looked at intersectionally, right? Like, I mean, we're two white women talking. So, but yeah, no, absolutely. But kind of like going back to, okay, it comes up, like, how did you learn to trust your own, like the rhythm of your own drums? Like, how did you kind of like really start accepting, like, first, like it all started, right? Like with the awareness, okay, there is good girl and Tyrant King, like good girl showing up as people pleasing. You correct me if I'm missing anything or if I'm wrong. Good people pleasing, I'd say, could also show up in your business over delivering, like not like
over giving.
Oh yes, like not being strict with your boundaries, like generally like caring about everyone else before your own needs, like that. And then Tyrant King is like kind of like the traditional like hustle highway, like push through until you kind of like break down because there's literally no more fuel left.
Yes.
And like the kind of like the spirit of like the ends justify the means, or how does it go?
Yes. Yeah. The ends justify the means.
Yeah, exactly. Now
it's all about the destination. It doesn't matter how you get there.
So we're not Tyrant King energy here on the city. But yeah, exactly. Like you just, I don't know, you just want to get where you want to go as fast as possible. It's whatever, like you don't really care. Like in the stereotypical boxes. So that's kind of the first thing you kind of have to be aware of, that this is going on, consciously, unconsciously, whatever. And then after you identify that, how did you uncover when what drum is beating? How to trust it?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think that there were two main pieces for me that helped me to uncover it. One was working with my own coach and mentor, because sometimes we need someone else who's further along on the path and can hear what we are saying, but we can't even hear ourselves say.
Yeah. And also kind of like holds up a mirror so you see yourself reflected.
Yes.
Because there are parts you cannot see because you're too close. You have too many stories. You have.
Yes. And it's amazing, like little glimmers of soul just escape from someone's mouth. And so it's having, our ears out and listening with our full body and our full soul to say like, oh, wait, let's go back and amplify that voice so that you as the person and me as the person could start to hear it for myself, because we're saying, it seeps out when we're not paying attention. It's just that oftentimes we don't have a lot of people in our culture who listen for it, right? We have a lot of the Tyrant King good girl who pull forth those voices, and the voice of the soul that comes through is oftentimes like, that's unrealistic, or like, oh, don't get too big for your britches, or all of these sayings that kind of smack it down.
We sort of self-censor before we actually even voice it.
Yep, exactly.
Isn't, like you said, we don't have enough people who listen for it. Yes, I agree. But also, isn't it like that we don't have enough people, and I mean society as a whole, who facilitate spaces that feel safe enough for a voice, for like soul that wisdom to come out?
Yes, 100%. Because I think a lot of people facilitate spaces from these other kinds of energies, right? The Tyrant King
like
energy,
the intellect, and not necessarily like the instinct, the innate wisdom,
space for emotion that sometimes, we have to come through first before, like there's some truth to emotion, like let's give it space to express so we can see what lives underneath it, and people get really uncomfortable with it. And so
there are some people who really get uncomfortable with it.
We're like, it's like, nope, there's no crying in this space, right? And so that, I don't think it's very difficult.
They're just like, okay, she's a woman, she's crying, okay, she's hysteric.
Yeah, exactly. Overly emotional. So I think that that's definitely part of it, is that And so then our soul voice doesn't feel safe to come out, right?
Yeah.
It wants, and I think part of the beauty of coaching is that it can provide this fertile space. It's like if you imagine the voice to be like a seed that's going to be planted and grow, it's like if we put it down on the concrete, nothing's going to happen. Like someone can just step on it and it's crushed, and then we have to redo this whole process again. And so it's about creating that kind of fertile soil, watering, providing the nourishment and the sunlight and, that kind of loving presence and that safe presence so that we can allow that voice to come forth and to hear it for ourselves. And the other piece that was huge for me was Koya, which is movement. And that was to help me, right, get out of my head, which is where those voices live, right? All of those other voices are very intellectual. They're very like up in the head solely. And not to, I think the mind offers beautiful gifts, and sometimes it can shut down and, it can split us off from these other ways of knowing and feeling. And so through movement, it was started to heal this space within my mind-body connection. And I started to be able to hear, one of the central tenets of Koya is that it doesn't matter what it looks like to anyone else. What matters is how it feels to you.
Oh, I love that. Yes.
And so if as a rehabilitating good girl, where everything is what does it look like to other people, to start to have the felt experience and sensation in my body, to just have a space to turn towards this question of what does this actually feel like to me? Like, what does this movement feel like in my body, rather than how can I perform for you?
How can I look sexy and innocent at the same time?
Yes, exactly. Yes. But instead it's like, oh, what actually feels good in my body? What feels true in my body? And then you begin to take that out of the dance space into your whole life. And you start to ask yourself this question of like, if I cared less what it looked like to other people and I cared more about what felt true for me, what choices would I make in my life then?
Ooh. Do you want to share with me what kind of choices you made since you had that realization? What were like the kind of like the biggest choices you've made since kind of like discovering Koya and integrating that?
That's a beautiful question. Well, I think going back to corporate was one of them to kind of circle back, right? Because what it looked like to other people almost kept me from doing it, right? Except for what it felt like to me. I moved back to Dallas, Texas, which when I was younger was something I said I would never, ever do. And so, but there was something in me that was like, I want to move back here. And it's these, sometimes it's small choices of like, how do I want to begin my day?
Oh God, yes. Like,
right?
It doesn't have to be like the eat, pray, love big things at the same time. There's always kind of like this exercise I do with some clients who are really stuck on the if then thing, right? If I reach whatever, then. And I'm like, okay, so let's do this exercise, right? Like you've reached the 100K month, the 100, whatever it is, you've reached it all. Whatever. You have the dream body, you have the dream life, you have everything, right? So now write down 20 things from the moment you get up until you go back to sleep, what you do. And usually like it's not the big, like, right? It's not like the big things or like, oh, I would do like whatever. It's like, oh, I would get up and I would not look at my phone. I would do a breathing exercise for 5 minutes, or I would drink my water with a lemon slice in it, just because, like, I don't know, I fucking want to. I deserve it. And then I'm like, okay, but this doesn't have anything to do with like you having 100K months. Just do that now, right?
Yes. Oh my God, yes. It's like, why do we not give ourselves the permission?
Yes.
Right? It's like we have to earn our worth. We have to earn this life when like you said, it's like so often it's these small moments, these little shifts that are really, that come from that space of what feels good to me, what feels true for me, right? What is
absolutely.
like, what is the pace and the rhythm of movement through my day that feels delicious? And noticing,
I love the word
like,
delicious.
yeah, why do we get into that, like, you know, but for many of us, I think that's why I love the name of your podcast, is like, we enjoy the scenic route, right? Like, we enjoy this kind of meandering, soulful, like, where
the
there's, you know, there's delightful, delightful surprises along the way.
And the waterfalls and and wearing your good clothes, because saving them up for some special opportunity is like pointless. Just wear them now or donate them.
This was my life. You literally, that exact thing was a huge fucking thing for me this year. I had a dress that I bought that I was like, I love this dress. And I realized, I was like, what am I saving it for? Like, why does joy have to be saved for a year from now when I have it? Like, I could just wear it to go to the coffee shop and feel great. And I think that's how we create, you know, this wild and enchanted life that I think that is really, we're longing for, and that is coming up for us, that we already have the answers of what that is.
Yes.
It's just listening to that voice and giving ourselves permission to do it now.
Yeah, I love that. That's such a beautiful, like, note to end it. Like, give yourself permission to do it now. Like, whatever you've been saving up or holding on to for if then, fuck it. Just put the lemon in your water now. Wear the good dress to Target. Like, go nuts, right? Like, go wild. Like, just do it now. I love that.
Yes.
Oh, this is good. Like, I don't know, there's nothing more to add like this, or just like, amen. Like, this is it. We're preached, we're served, we're like,
mic drop, we are out. On that note, bye.
But before we actually mic drop and leave, for everyone listening, you brought something really, really cool with us. It's a training that helps you identifying your inner good girl, or rebel, or tyrant king cage. Do you want to tell me quickly something about it?
Yeah, so this is a video training that I think, if these ideas or energies are new to you, just being able to name and identify them without blame and shame and disgust. Yes, just to notice, and to notice that it's like, oh, because so often we think it's like, oh, this is just who I am. And we don't realize that it's actually a learned thing, like a learned way of being.
Yes.
And so to be able to give ourselves enough space to see when these patterns arise, to see that, like, how they might be impacting how we show up, and to know that there might be something else that is underneath them that is actually more true for you. That's what the intention of the training is.
I love it. So, okay. So if that read delicious to you, then check out the link in the show notes. And there's, so yeah, I mean, that's because you always need to start with assessing what is. That's the first step. So I'm sure this video is going to be a brilliant first way into that. So I have one last question before I let you go. And this is always kind of like, because I always need new materials. What book are you currently reading?
Oh my gosh, this is a great question. Okay, so I literally yesterday, I read like a fiend. So I started The Secret Life of Plants. I have only read the introduction.
That sounds very intriguing, The Secret Life of Plants.
And then the last book I actually finished was Beauty by John O'Donohue.
Oh, The True Sources of Compassion, Serenity, and Hope. Ooh, that sounds nice.
Yeah, so that one, it has some real beautiful pieces in there. My number one recommendation is either Women Who Run with the Wolves.
That's a good one.
Or Belonging by Toko Turner.
Yeah, Belonging is the best one. Or have you ever read Braiding Sweetgrass?
Yes. Oh, I love that book. Yes.
Yeah, I don't know. We should probably, I don't know, stay tuned for the Scenic Route Book Club.
Yes. Clearly we have similar tastes.
Maybe, I don't know, maybe that's coming down the road. Who knows?
Oh,
Hey, Linda, thank you so much for talking with me today on the scenic route. We went like left and right and up and beyond, like and deep and like red wine deep, although we did not have red wine. What a pity. Thank you so much for being here.
oh, thank you so much for having me. This was such a joy. I loved that we literally meandered, like our conversation was a scenic route in itself. Like,
Yes.
I loved it. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for listening to the Scenic Route podcast. I hope you've enjoyed today's episode and that you can take something from it that feels right to you. I'd be so grateful if you could share the Scenic Route podcast. As always, you can head over to scenicroutepodcast.com to check out all the links and resources from today's episode. Oh, and while you're there, don't forget to download my free email course, Intuitive Branding Invitation, to teach you how you can successfully tune into your own brand frequency and rediscover your brand's unique gifts, strengths, and talents. So thanks again. Talk soon.